Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Exodus chapter 21, verse 28. If an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. But the owner of the ox shall be acquitted. So as we continue through Exodus, we're going to continue through these initial set of rules and judgments that the Israelites will be under as their fledgling nation begins to form on their own and have to govern their own. So here, God is telling Moses and Moses telling the people that if an ox gores a man or woman to death, if it gets loose and it goes wild and it kills somebody, then the ox needs to be put to death. And this is something that we still do if a bear wanders into a inhabitable area and kills a human. The bear has to be put down. Some people don't like that, but the idea is if the bear has killed a human once, it's probably going to try to do it again. And in this case, they're saying the flesh, you're not going to kill the ox to eat it. It's not going to get eaten. You're not going to get rewarded for this. The owner, though, is going to be acquitted. You're not going to blame the owner. But as we continue in verse 29, but if the ox tended to thrust with its horn in times past, and it has been made known to its owner, and he has not kept it confined, so that it has killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. Basically, if the owner of the ox, if it gores somebody, it's the first time this thing's ever happened, then the owner's not liable for it. But if it's known to have been a dangerous animal, and the owner did nothing to try to keep that animal under control, then the man or woman who owns it must also die. The ox is going to get stoned, and the owner also dies because it shows that he has little to no concern for the welfare of those around him. And you can't have that in a functioning society. One of the reasons our society is deteriorating as horribly as it is now is because we live in a culture now that does not show any regard for the well-being of its neighbors. We live in a very narcissistic me society, and therefore we are plummeting. Where God is just starting this nation up, he's watching us deteriorate before him. If there is imposed on him a sum of money, then he shall pay to redeem his life, whatever is imposed on him. So if there's a sum of money that's made the judgment that he may redeem his life, there are apparently some circumstances where that could be the law, that the rule is that he should be put to death. But if there is deemed a reason why he should be put to death, but we're now going to levy a judgment against him so that he shall pay money to redeem himself, then he has to pay whatever the judges say or be put to death. Whether it has gored a son or gored a daughter, according to this judgment, it shall be done to him. If the ox gores a male or female servant, he shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So if it gores a son or daughter, same punishment, man or woman, son or daughter. But if it comes to a male or female servant, they're worth less, and then it's a monetary thing only, not the death penalty, so to speak. So, as much as we don't like these things nowadays, and we don't like to read them, and we like to run from them, as I pointed out before, this is the nature of a fledgling society in coming out of this world where these were the rules. Servants were treated as property. People were treated as property by every nation, by every people, throughout all of human history until just recently. And even then, there's more slaves in the world today than there was during the Atlantic slave trade. So this is something that's never gone away. It's a human condition. God wants people to be perfect in emulation of Christ, but his fledgling nation could not go from infant crawling to full-paced perfected running. So he has to take them baby steps. And if a man opens a pit Or if a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or donkey falls in it, the owner of the pit shall make it good. He shall give money to their owner, but the dead animal shall be his. So they weren't to touch dead animals. That would make them ceremonial unclean. So if this person opens a pit and doesn't cover it, doesn't tell anybody, then he's liable for the damage done. He's liable for the issue. He opened the pit, didn't tell anyone, didn't cover it. So he's liable for the damages. But the dead animal shall be his. It's not a reward. It's not like, hey, now you go get to eat that ox. No, you now have to dispose of that ox or donkey. And now you are unclean until you are finished your ritual cleaning. So now you can't participate in the religious order of things, the religious rituals, because you have to touch this dead animal. You have to now take care of this body. If one man's ox hurts another, so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the money from it, and the dead ox they shall also divide. Or if it was known that the ox tended to thrust in time past, and the owner has not kept it confined, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead animal shall be his alone. So if it's an accident, then you're going to sell the live ox, divide the money between you, and you now have to split the uncleanliness of the dead animal, basically. However, if once again you are not responsible with your animal and you know it has been a danger in the past, now you're going to lose an ox for an ox, and the dead animal is going to be your responsibility. So moving on to chapter 22. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. So if you steal, you need to make restitution. Depending on what you stole, sometimes 5 times as much, sometimes 4 times as much for a sheep. But if you are caught stealing, you now have to make restoration. You need to make good on what you did. If the thief is found breaking in and he is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. If you're breaking in, if someone breaks into your home, you're allowed to defend yourself. If you're found trying to steal something, you accept the consequences of that action. Nowadays, we'll always hear, and you'll see it all the time, especially on TikTok, where teenagers have no knowledge of the world. They'll say, oh, if someone breaks into your house and you shoot them, or if somebody tries to steal your dog and you kill them, you value your dog above that person's life. And the answer is no. That person valued my dog more than their own life. If somebody breaks into my home to, I don't know, they might be stealing my PlayStation 5. I don't know why they're breaking into my house. But for whatever reason they're breaking into my house, my TV, my PlayStation 5, my non-existent jewelry, because none of us in the house own it or really wear it outside of, things that I've been wearing for 30 years. The person breaking in has decided their life is of less value than what they're trying to steal. That's the thief making that decision, not the person defending their property. And that's why God himself says, there shall be no guilt in the bloodshed. If the sun is risen on him, there shall be guilt for his bloodshed. He should make full restitution. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So basically, if you're breaking in, okay, if you've been found and you can be apprehended, then you can't really be just killing people. If the theft is certainly found alive in his hand, whether it is an ox, a donkey, or a sheep, he shall restore double. So basically, it's all mentioning what kind of restitution you're going to have to make for your theft. As Jesus says, or it might have actually been Proverbs. My mind's not just wandered on that one for a second. But no one faults a thief for stealing bread. to feed his family, but he'll be forced to make restitution. But someone who commits a murder, someone who does something more horrible, somebody who is doing something out of desperation is normally forgiven by society. Somebody who does something out of malice is not going to be forgiven. And that's what this is kind of saying about this theft. The thief breaking in. You're breaking in and you're found breaking in, and somebody tries to defend or stop you, you're breaking in with malice. You're not doing this out of desperation. So there's going to be no guilt for your bloodshed. But in other words, the difference is the malice and the desperation. And this is speaking of people who are stealing to enrich themselves with malice. If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed and lets loose his animal and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. So, once again, people's property rights matter. Field, vineyard, that's how they're going to make their living. That's how they're going to feed the rest of the town as well, by making money and selling food and selling wine. So if you're just wantonly letting your animals loose and they go in another man's field and do this, you're going to have to make restitution of it. If a fire breaks out and catches its thorns, so that stacked grain, standing grain, or the field is consumed, he who kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. So once again, all of these are interpersonal things. They're all about what has to happen if you are being irresponsible, either with your livestock or in your actions. And it's pointing out all these things, accidents or not, are going to be made right. You're going to have to restore what was lost. If a man delivers to his neighbor money or articles to keep and it is stolen out of the man's house, if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, then the master of the house shall be brought to the judges to see whether he has put his hand into his neighbor's goods. Basically, if the thief is found, he's going to have to pay double if it's stolen out of a man's house. If there's no thief found, then the person who was holding on to the articles will have to go before the judges because it's possible he himself stole them and blamed it on a thief. That's all that's saying. For any kind of trespass, whether it concerns an ox, a donkey, a sheep, or clothing, or any kind of lost thing which another claims to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whomever the judges condemn shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man delivers to his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep, and it dies, is hurt, is driven away, no one seeing it, then an oath of the Lord shall be between them two. And he who has not put his hand into his neighbor's good, and the owner of it shall accept that, and he shall not make it good. So, if you're watching and keeping track and caring for someone's donkey, ox, sheep, animals, if it dies or it's driven away and no one sees it, then they make an oath before the Lord, which we're warned about that, to make our yes be yes and our no be no, not to make oaths in front of the Lord, especially not vain ones. And that, he didn't put his hands in his neighbor's goods, that he's not stealing this ox or donkey or sheep or anything, then he won't have to make it good. That, they're going to make a covenant before God in front of the judges, and this is what is said, then this is what it is. I mean, sometimes they're driven away. Sometimes a wolf gets them. And sometimes it's in the middle of the night and no one sees it. So in that case, you're just looking for malice. Accidents happen. Tragedies happen. But they're looking for malice in these cases. But if in fact it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to the owner of it. If it is torn to pieces by a beast, then he shall bring it as evidence, and he shall not make good what was torn. So if you can find what was stolen, if you can find a problem, then it needs to be brought to light, and you need to make it right. When it says he shall not make good, it means he's not going to have to pay restitution. If you can prove that it was torn apart by a beast, then you're not going to have to make restitution of it. You're not going to have to pay him back for the loss. And if a man borrows anything from his neighbor and it becomes injured or dies, the owner of it not being with it, he shall surely make it good. If its owner was with it, he shall not make it good. If it was hired, it came for its hire. So if you borrow anything and the owner isn't there, then you're going to have to pay him back for it. If the owner is there while you're borrowing it, then he should have been watching out for his own property. And if it was hired out, then you got paid for it already, is the point. If a man entices a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall surely pay the bride price for her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money according to the bride price of virgins. So, if we're not even going to go with entices, we're not even going with rape, we're really just going with if someone seduces a young woman who is not betrothed, who isn't already engaged to be married, and he lies with her, then that now needs to become his wife. He needs to pay the bride price to the parents. But if the father's going, no, I refuse to let her be be your wife, I refuse to let her go live with you, then that person who seduced the woman still has to pay the bride price for virgins, even if he's not marrying her. Because in this case, the father would get to decide no. So once again, for all of the women are treated as second class, they really aren't. God is putting in place steps to protect women in this fledgling nation, coming out of nations and going to be surrounded by nations that do not treat women the way God would like women to be treated. So once again, baby steps, but steps nevertheless. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Sorceress, women casting spells. Now, there's no real such thing as magic. There is demonic influence. There is what most sorceries in scripture is considered. That's pharmakia. So that's pharmaceuticals. That's illicit drugs. Whether they be kind of potions or food, they're illicit drugs. So you will not allow someone practicing sorcery, witchcraft, or demonic activity, women trying to, and men trying to commune with demons and pagan gods, which we're told are also demons, or illicit drugs. You won't permit them to live because they're horrible for society. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. Humans don't lie with animals. We know what that means. That means sexual relation with animals. Yeah, the Bible covers that one too. That's nasty. Don't do that. He who sacrifices to any god except to the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. So you only sacrifice to God, to the Lord, to the one true God. If you are sacrificing to anything else of the pagans, you are to be cut off and destroyed, either exiled or killed. You shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So you know what it was like to be oppressed. You know what it was like to be mistreated. When you were strangers, you weren't an invading army. You went there to live and help and bring the nation of Egypt prosperity. You know what that was like. Don't do that to others. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way and they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. God does not play around with people who take advantage of women or fatherless children. Widows and orphans, children in general, are precious to God, and he does not play. As Jesus would say, it's better for someone to have a millstone wrapped around their neck and thrown into the deepest part of the sea than to pull a child away from God, to do harm to a child. And God, Old Testament, New Testament, it doesn't matter. His thoughts on that have not changed. Do not mess with children. We are to care for the widow and the orphan, not to take advantage of them, and not to afflict them with any level of discomfort or wrath or hatred or suffering. If you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you, you shall not be like a money lender to him. You shall not charge him interest. So among the Jews, among the Hebrews, you're not to charge each other interest. If you lend $20, you get back $20. You don't lend $20 like a money lender and say, okay, well, you're going to owe me X percent. So when you pay it back, you're going to owe me 25 because I lent you 20. That's how people make money, and God is saying that is not what you are to do among each other. If you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for that is his only covering. It is his garment for his skin. What will he sleep in? And it will be that when he cries to me, I will hear, for I am gracious. If you take his garment as a pledge, for whatever reason, they need to borrow something, so they're using it as interest against whatever they're taking from you, and whatever the deal is, as a pledge. At nighttime, because remember, they are in Israel, they are in the Middle East, they are in the wilderness. It might be very hot in the desert during the day, but at night it drops to freezing. So they will need that garment lest they freeze when they're sleeping, because God is gracious. He understands what happened, but you are to care for each other as I care for you. That is what God is telling them. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay to offer the first of your ripe fruit and your juices. So don't revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. That's something we struggle with in our time today. But we're supposed to pray for our rulers. But also, as he goes on, do not delay to offer the firstborn, the first of your ripe fruit and your juices. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. Once again, we're to pledge everything firstborn to God. That was the law for the Hebrews. Every firstborn was to be pledged by the Hebrews, by the Israelites, because of the firstborn sacrifice of the Egyptians, because of the cost of what it took to get them free from Egypt. Likewise, you shall do with your oxen and your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. Sadly, of course, for oxen and sheep, that means they're going to be sacrificed to the Lord on the 8th day. On the 8th day, a firstborn son will be, or the sons will be circumcised. And firstborn sons were normally dedicated to the temple and had to be bought back and purchased back and redeemed in the eyes of the Lord. And you shall be holy men to me. You shall not eat meat torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. So as we've seen earlier, as we were going through, it mentioned, it shall be his responsibility. If it's torn, it shall be his responsibility. It's because they're not to eat that meat. It's their responsibility to dispose of it, and in that way also be made ceremonially unclean during the time of having to get rid of it and having to wash and reconsecrate themselves to God. So moving on to chapter 23. You shall not circulate a false report. Do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. You shall not follow a crowd to do evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute as to turn aside after many to pervert justice. You shall not show partiality to a poor man in his dispute. I was looking for partiality like 4 episodes ago. Couldn't think of the word. But we're not to generate a false report. We're not to circulate it. We're not to spread rumors. We're not supposed to lie about each other. We're not supposed to falsely accuse each other of things. Don't follow wickedness. Don't follow a crowd. Don't be as a mob to do evil. We see this often with the Israelites as they go after prophets, as they went after Jesus. We will see it as they go after Stephen. You see this often. People feel safe in a crowd, whether that crowd is doing good or doing evil. And when people's emotions are heightened, great evil can be executed by them without a second thought, because they see other people wishing the same thing they wish and feeling the same emotions they feel. And they believe it is justified in that case because other people feel what they feel. Now, as it says, you shall not testify in a dispute to pervert justice. You can't show partiality to a poor man, even if you're trying to do right by him. You do not pervert justice. God is perfectly just. We are not. But we have to do our imperfect best to judge in an honest and impartial way. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall surely bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying under its burden, and you would refrain from helping it, you shall surely help him with it. So he's saying, if you have a chance to help your neighbor, you help him. Even if it's your enemy, even if it is someone who hates you and you hate him, you still help them. As Jesus said, love your enemy as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. These aren't talking about their militaristic enemies. They're just talking about people with which they have animosity with, of their own people. Help them. We live in a society. Not everyone's Christian. Help them. Because we're to show the love of God in our lives and reflect it onto them so they can understand, hey, I don't like that guy and I didn't think he liked me, but there's something different about the way he carries himself. Help each other. You shall not pervert the judgment of your poor in his dispute. Keep yourself far from a false matter. Do not kill the innocent and righteous, for I will not justify the wicked. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the discerning and perverts the words of the righteous. Once again, do everything you can to walk out life in a righteous manner, to judge with impartiality. Whether it's for good or for bad, you don't elevate somebody because you think they should be elevated because they've had a tough go at life. No, you do it as impartial as possible. Take no bribes. Do no wickedness. Also, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Once again, you know what it was like to be a stranger in a foreign land, so you know how to treat other people because you want to be treated that way as well. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its produce, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what you leave the beasts of the field may eat. In like manner you shall do with your vineyard and your olive grove. So it's interesting that, like the 7th day is a Sabbath, the 7th year was meant to be a harvest Sabbath. And the ground was supposed to lie fallow, because what happens in farming is if you continue to harvest and reap and sow year after year without giving the ground a chance to reestablish its nutrients and lie fallow, it begins to yield less and less. And when we get there, when the Israelite or the Judeans from the southern kingdom of Judah are exiled into Babylon, it is even told to them. It even says in Scripture, the reason you're going away for 70 years is because you never listened to my commandment to let the ground lie fallow on the seventh year. So now because of that, I'm going to let the ground lay fallow for 70 years. So when you return, it'll be fertile again. God knows what he's doing. Listen to what he commands us to do. 6 days you shall do your work, and on the seventh day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female servant and stranger may be refreshed. And in all that I have said to you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods, nor let it be heard from your mouth. Follow the Sabbath, but be circumspect. Be reflective on what comes out of your mouth. As Jesus would say, it is not what goes into a man's mouth that defiles him, it is what comes out. No gods before me. The only name coming out of our lips should be that of God Almighty, should be that of Christ, of our Father, should be the holy name of God. We shouldn't even be mentioning other gods. And it's not mentioned as in, Thor. Oh, no, it's, you should not be speaking highly of any other false god, any other pagan deity of worship. Don't let that be heard out of your mouth, but only professing the greatness and love and wondrous bounty that is found in the Lord. That way everyone knows where our heart is. As Paul would say, I would stop eating meat if my meat eating would cause an immature brother to stumble. Now that is a much longer history with it, because the meat he's talking about is specifically meat that was sacrificed to foreign gods, which, as he said, doesn't make a difference because they don't exist, and we're under the covenant of grace. But the name of the Lord should be holy in our mouth, should flow freely from our mouth in praises and worship, and should be the only one heard in that fashion. Period. Speak only the name of Jesus, with praise, worship, excitement, jubilation, and preaching on the blessings he has bestowed in our lives. All right, that's where we're going to end it this morning. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you back again next time. But until then, be blessed.